why do you get attached so easily to men only to end up being ghosted, dismissed, or heartbroken time and again? Maybe you just met them on an app or exchanged a few messages, or you went on one date and suddenly you feel like you found the one. You start fantasizing about your future together, ignoring their red flags and convincing yourself that this time it's going to be different. And perhaps they are a bit different for a few weeks or months, but then just like before, they pull back, they go cold, or they ghost you altogether. And you're left wondering, why does this keep happening to me? This kind of obsessive love with a partner who isn't fully known to you or isn't a healthy match is a type of love addiction or limerence, and it actually comes from an attachment wound deep inside you that gets triggered by specific types of people who are unavailable in some way. You learn a type of attachment called fantasy attachment to this person, which is a form of projection that comes from your own wounding. And today I'll unpack this subconscious pattern and core wounds keeping you stuck in this fantasy state. And I'm also going to show you how to break the cycle so that you don't keep falling for the wrong people. I'll also show you how this affects your nervous system on a somatic level so that you can reestablish safety in your body and turn this pattern around, which can't actually be done by any top-down or cognitive-based tools. So if you've ever said to yourself, I know better in my head, but I can't seem to stop this behavior, this video is for you. Like Alice, who found herself falling head over heels in love with a man she hadn't even met. And when his text communication became inconsistent, it brought up intense feelings of abandonment she thought she'd already worked through and sent her spiraling into loneliness, abandonment, and sadness. Once she learned the tools to heal at a somatic level, and in particular how to regulate her nervous system when dating, everything changed for her because she was finally prioritizing a peaceful, loving, and emotionally connected relationship to herself above all others. And if you need help doing this, this is the work that I do inside Heal Your Heart School. I would love to speak with you on a free consultation call. You can book a call with me in the link in the description below. So if you fall fast for men you've just met who, let's face it, they are complete strangers, it's like having this sticky, clingy energy inside of you. I liken it to an octopus that it just hooks its tentacles onto someone. And you fall for a potential match quickly and you get carried away in fantasy land. You are typically very picky with matches, and this person matches up to a very specific preference in a person for you. But this specific criteria is actually your need for a partner to mimic your earliest experiences of love in order for you to be interested. And anything outside of that actually feels boring or uninteresting to you. But the problem is that your earliest experiences of love came with pain, abandonment, feeling very alone, unseen, or unheard. So that sticky, clingy energy inside of you is only going to get activated with someone who will produce those same feelings of abandonment and pain and loneliness in you in the long run. Your nervous system is actually picking up from the smallest indications of their unavailability. Red flags, even just what they put on their dating profile, a few messages with them, and you already have amassed a whole lot of information about them. And often they have a type of charisma that unavailable people often have, and a need for power or control over you. And your subconscious attachment system is clocking these outside of your awareness and pulling you in towards them because they are all similar dynamics you experienced from your primary caregiver, like your dad who wasn't showing up for you in a healthy way, or the way that your mum and dad interacted. Now, a healthy, available partner, on the other hand, is going to seem off-putting to you or boring because you're used to being loved in an intermittent way, and a constantly reliable connection will feel foreign and unsettling to your attachment system. But the truth is that you're attaching to someone you don't know at all, right? They are a total stranger. And the even deeper truth is that you're not actually attaching to them per se. You're attaching to the version of them that you've created in your mind, which I call a fantasy attachment. This is where you meet someone that meets the specific criteria based on your childhood conditioning, and you start running these stories and movies in your mind about how the relationship will play out, because the old attachment memories from childhood and subsequent activation of your nervous system, which is actually a type of anxiety, is interpreted by you as love, because that's all you knew love to be when you grew up. So your body is actually in anxiety, fight, flight, but you interpret it as love, which is absurd because you can't truly love someone you've never met or hardly know. But your body doesn't actually know the difference between love and anxiety because it grew up experiencing inconsistent, unavailable love, which was extremely anxiety inducing. And so that's all you know love to be. And your nervous system is wired to think that that's love, which is why the healthy type of love seems boring because it isn't activating for your nervous system. A healthy match is going to make you feel safe and grounded and seen and heard, and you'll enjoy a secure bond with them as the weeks and months pass, because the more you open up to each other, the closer you get. This is a healthy kind of intimacy that just cannot exist when you easily and quickly attach to men and go into this fantasy limerent state, because the fantasy version of them you're attaching to, that you're creating in your mind, is actually blocking you from getting to know the real them. And in fact, you lack the intimacy skills to open up and be vulnerable to them because you didn't learn safety when you opened up as a child. And any kind of open vulnerability feels scary to you on a subconscious level and even at the level of your nervous system. Now, this kind of behavior repels healthy matches. They're not going to stick around because they don't feel fully seen and heard by you, right? You're too busy putting them on a fantasy pedestal and projecting onto them. And the minute they do or say something that doesn't align with your projection of them, they'll feel dismissed or disconnected and walk away, because intimacy and connection clearly isn't developing for them, which they need to stick around. So over attaching to a projection of them is actually you blocking connection. So why are you blocking connection? So you don't get hurt. This is a safety mechanism you've developed subconsciously to make sure you don't get hurt. A primary caregiver who let you down time and again, or abandoned you, or deeply hurt you in some way, meant that you had to put up this wall and instead attach to a fantasy caregiver, the version of your parent that did show up for you, which is why we often only see the best in our parents when we look back and struggle to really acknowledge the childhood trauma you experienced and the reality of them letting us down, which turned into us ignoring red flags, right? As an adult, that's where that comes from as well. We had to ignore the red flags in our parents too in order to keep this image of them. And we minimize the experience we had because as children, we had to believe the best in our parents in order to feel safe in the world so our brains could develop. So your need of connection in such a volatile environment was so important that your brilliant child brain created a fantasy attachment so you could still experience love and connection with your parents, but from a safe distance through this distorted lens that is your projection. But the problem is that although that kept you safe then, you didn't mature out of that habit, and it's now a great big wall that's blocking you from experiencing healthy love and true intimacy with others. And it keeps you living in this fantasy world where you never truly bond with someone, right? You only bond with the safe version of them in your mind. The act of fantasy attachment is effectively a safety blanket that you throw over a potential partner so you don't have to experience the scary reality of true feelings and intimacy, which is foreign to you just because it's unfamiliar and uncomfortable. I had this pattern of fantasy attachments in my past, and although I'm now healed, I notice a pattern as to when it would flare up. I'd be going through a big transition in my life, or there were deep, heavy emotions and situations happening around me, and it would come up as a coping mechanism to bypass feeling those feelings and just latch onto someone and live in fantasy as a way of self-soothing. For example, if I was feeling particularly lonely, I would more easily attach to emotionally unavailable guys to avoid feeling lonely. And I'd get stuck in this rut where I'd be constantly obsessing about them and projecting onto them and all their potential and what they needed to do to make us work, rather than take responsibility for my own emotional state and choices and let myself live in the discomfort of where I'm at and work step by step to get out of it. Fantasy attachment is always an easier option if you've learned it as a habit. Now, it's worth mentioning that if you're prone to dopamine addiction, if that's your neuro preference, love addiction and this type of fantasy attachment is probably going to be an ingrained habit for you, because the hit of dopamine you get through inconsistent breadcrumbs and the uncertainty of a connection with someone is far greater than a healthy, stable, predictable connection. Think about it. The actual text you get from someone doesn't feel nearly as good as waiting for it, right? And the actual encounter with them doesn't feel nearly as good as thinking about it and the potential of it and what could play out then. I know that this was happening for me when I prioritized these kind of fantasy connections over other aspects of my life. My life became about getting dopamine through whoever I was fantasy attaching to, and my friendships and health and fitness and career goals just fell by the wayside. I'd even go so far as to say that because this started for me at adolescence, I never truly learned how to prioritize a healthy, balanced life for myself, because I was like a horse with blinders on. I was just chasing dopamine from whoever was my obsession at the time. Now, it's important for you to know that even though your love addiction is manifesting as a fantasy projection of the person you're attaching to and a cognitive pattern where you're chasing dopamine, the actual wound that runs love addiction lives in the body and in the nervous system. That wound is your abandonment wound. It's a felt sense of abandonment from childhood when a primary caregiver couldn't meet your needs in some way. Perhaps they physically left, or there was a divorce or a death, or perhaps they were simply emotionally unavailable or emotionally immature themselves, and you perceived abandonment time and again when you needed them. And this left an imprint in your subconscious and nervous system of deep feelings of unworthiness, abandonment, and loneliness. And those emotions and scars live energetically in the body. They cannot be healed through talk therapy or any kind of cognitive work. They've got to be healed from the bottom up, from the body. I have a whole video that I encourage you to watch on that here. So your body's response to this intense, consistent feeling of abandonment as a child is to cling to love. And in the absence of healthy love is to create an avatar, an idol, so to speak, to cling to, one that is loving, available, consistent, and chooses you. And every time you meet someone that makes you feel even the slightest familiarity with a primary caregiver from childhood, something's replicated from then, this fantasy attachment will get activated and you'll start running that avatar in your mind, updating it with current bits of information you're getting from the guy you're attaching to in real time. Now, the core wound is the site of where your first abandonment was inflicted, but it's your nervous system that runs this whole attachment show, because your nervous system grew up around all your traumas and wounds and has proven ways to stay safe when there is potential danger around. Now, that danger is any kind of vulnerability you're feeling, big life transitions, loss or grief, or just seasons of life where you aren't doing so well. These are when you're most prone to fantasy attachment. And your nervous system uses this attachment style to get back to safety. And knowing this is key because it allows us to intervene and break the pattern permanently. Knowing that love addiction and fantasy attachment is just a way your body gets back to safety means we can rewire ourselves to choose more healthy ways to achieve safety. Now, when I say safety, I'm referring to a felt sense of safety in connection to yourself and to others. Now, we need to start by addressing safety within ourselves, because the very act of fantasy attachment is self-sabotage and self-abandonment, and it erodes self-trust and self-esteem when we constantly live outside of our reality. So we need to learn to establish an internal attachment safety in order to break the pattern our nervous system has of deferring to a fantasy attachment to stay safe. Instead, we need to rely on this internal attachment safety, which is a felt sense of safety and security with the connection we have within ourselves. Now, internal attachment safety contains 4 aspects, and in fact, this is the same kind of attachment safety you need to have in relationship with others, where you feel emotionally safe and secure in your relationship with yourself because you meet yourself with self-compassion and understanding. You trust that you are consistently there for yourself, especially when you're feeling vulnerable, upset, or in need, and you'll always act in your own best interest. And you accept yourself as you are without judgment or thinking you're too much. Your inner critic is kept under wraps, and you feel you can be yourself. You feel your feelings and you can recognize your needs. Now, this list probably feels impossible right now because your inner critic is likely running the show, you've got deep insecurities and are cut off from your true feelings and needs from years of self-abandonment. But knowing this allows you to see the lack of safety that exists within you to simply be yourself at the moment. So of course, you're going to be checking out of reality and fantasy attaching to others. So you need to slowly begin walking yourself home by leaning into these habits of internal safety. So in order to feel emotionally safe and secure in your relationship with yourself, you have to meet yourself with self-compassion and understanding. Rather than being harsh and critical of yourself, take the knowledge you have from these YouTube videos, everything you've read, and knowing your family of origin background, and really acknowledge how much sense it makes that you have these patterns and habits in your life. Put your hand on your heart and say, it makes so much sense. You don't feel safe in yourself. You didn't learn internal safety to feel your emotions from childhood. You had to cope with such difficult circumstances in the only way your child brain knew how. Thank your internal self for doing what it had to do to keep you safe by dissociating into fantasy so that you could carry on. Anytime you make you or your emotions or behaviors wrong, you're creating an unsafe environment within yourself. You're committing acts of internal violence, really. Now, yes, it's useful to acknowledge what is and isn't right for you, but there's been too much self-criticism to get to this point, and you need to balance it with a lot of love, compassion, and understanding. Speak to yourself as if you were speaking to a loved one. Self-trust takes time to build, and when you've been self-abandoning for years, even your whole life, it's like building a whole new version of yourself from the ground up. Notice where in your life you're letting yourself down, making decisions that aren't in alignment with you. What are your known patterns of self-abandonment now? How can you start showing up for yourself instead, setting boundaries or saying no when it's the harder thing to do? Start small. The smallest gestures of acting in your own best interest will snowball into a stronger muscle, but it takes repetition and time to build it like a muscle. So recognize the part of you inside you that lets you down consistently. Perhaps you know you should be doing something, but you feel you're too lazy or not self-disciplined enough. Go back to that first point, meet yourself with self-compassion and understanding, and recognize the payoff of the self-trust and self-esteem you'll grow when you do start to make more of the healthier choices for yourself. Now, it's not about making things wrong or right. It's about slowly turning around the ship by making 1% better choices every day. Now, knowing yourself and accepting yourself are two different things. And at the moment, your inner critic is probably so loud that you don't really know who you are. You're just too busy judging yourself. It's possible to both accept who you are and make 1% incremental changes to self-advocate, set boundaries, and show up for yourself. In fact, the two go hand in hand. Knowing who you are without judgment, what kind of boundaries do you need to honor that? If you accepted yourself 100%, what would it feel like to be in your skin? Maybe just for a day or even a moment right now. Remember, this is about creating internal safety. So we have to meet ourselves with a balance of self-discipline and self-compassion, 50-50. So what kind of self-acceptance do you need to have of yourself to truly feel comfortable and safe in your own skin? Now, this last point is really about celebrating who you are, not just accepting it. So can you push the edges of what lights you up, what makes you happy, what makes you truly you, and be more of you? Take up more space, feel more of your feelings, have more of your needs met. As a woman particularly, we learn to be smaller and feel less in a world run by men who don't have the same emotional experience as us, but we deserve to take up just as much space as others. So in the safety of your bedroom or house, can you put on one of your favorite songs and just be free to dance and just take up space? Just put on a timer for 60 seconds and see what it would feel like in your body. This kind of self-expression and permission to be yourself is incredibly liberating and really helps anchor safety in your body. So once you begin to lean in and establish this internal attachment safety, you'll notice your body and nervous system feels more safety and peace within yourself and has less need to seek external fantasy attachments to self-regulate. And if you want more help doing this, this is the work that I teach my clients inside Heal Your Heart School. So I would love to speak with you on a free consultation call. You can book a call in the link in my calendar below. In the meantime, here are some next step videos for you to watch so you can move one step closer to having a beautifully healthy relationship to yourself and to others. And for now, I will see you in the next video.